Now, it's been a day of diplomacy and dialogue in Tokyo as Japan hosts the leaders of India, Australia and the United States for the Quad Summit. On the agenda was the Russian invasion of Ukraine, maritime security, an open and free Indo-Pacific, climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, sources say India was lauded by other three Quad members on its handling of the COVID outbreak and its vaccine program. Apart from Quad, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also held bilaterals with President Joe Biden and a newly elected Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Now, for more on this, we're also being joined by Kadira Pethiagora from Melbourne, who is an international affairs expert and fellow at Australia-India Institute. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, my first question to you is, what is your assessment of the significance of the Quad Summit, especially in the backdrop of the war in Ukraine?
Yes, I think it's extremely significant that what Biden had said with regard to building on commonalities between the US and India, because the difference between the two countries' positions on the war in Ukraine had the potential to be the sort of the biggest fissure between the two countries since the Indo-US nuclear deal. And it really goes to the heart of the different worldviews that the two countries have. And I think what Biden is trying to do during the Quad and elsewhere is to try and build back those relations with India and repair some of the damage that had been done by the US lecturing India on this matter earlier in the year. Because I think the US really sees India as more important than just its views on Russia, and definitely focuses on India in relation to the China matter, where it needs India more.
Right. Now, we also saw that Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is holding bilaterals with Australian Prime Minister. Now, what is your take on the partnership and the cooperation between the two nations?
Yes, I think that the new Australian government is actually more closely aligned, slightly more closely aligned with India's general foreign policy worldview than the previous Australian government. It's more open to dialogue in the Indo-Pacific, including with China. It's also more open to multilateral approaches to foreign affairs, prioritizes the United Nations similar to the way India does. So I think there's some good opportunities for cooperation between the two countries now.
Right. And when it comes to China, what is your take on the framework and the setup by the Quad to counter China's growing influence in the region? How efficient do you think this would be?
Well, I think the Quad does a difficult balancing act because it's essentially a partnership aimed at deepening defense ties, but it has to also account for India's aversion to formal alliances, and it's not a formal treaty partnership like NATO. So it has to sort of balance those two competing forces. And I guess the success of the Quad would really depend on how India's relationship with China goes in the future. The more problematic that relationship, the more India will depend on the Quad. But if India's bilateral ties with China improve, then we'll see the Quad take a smaller role, I believe.
Right, absolutely. Now, Mr. Kadira Pethiagora, thank you so much for joining us with your analysis. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.